In this video help, I'm going to be covering some of the things that are very important that were not covered at all till this point. And that is the daily calendar, the expense screens, the employee screens, so that we can get a better idea of how to manage those other additional items. Let's start with the daily calendar. The daily calendar is actually an expensive item that was added to this application, and basically what it does is it is used to manage all of your individual appointments and those other things that you want to track. And what it does, it is made to allow you to add daily appointments, weekly appointments, monthly appointments, and annual, and then list them in a list view so you can see them in the list view. Now these are important in one respect, in that if you're putting in appointments, you're tracking them based on things that are important to you as far as mainly deliverables or service, or picking up items and delivering items to local or locations that are sites where you're taking rented items. Now, interestingly enough, this calendar is very effective as far as managing the information, but we've added a few things to it, and I'm going to explain what those are. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to create an appointment. And if you can see in the calendar down here, this is May of 2019, and this is the 10th, and there's actually an item that is scheduled on the 12th. And the color tells you that there's an activity or something that's going on within that area. So actually this screen is past the 10th, this is the 12th. So this is the current date, and this is a past event. And in this case, if I click on it, it's actually showing me the 10th up here is now the appropriate thing that's being shown. If I wanted to add a new daily account of things, I would want to go over here and pick the date where I wanted to add it. So for example, if I click on the 13th, it's going to change Monday, May 13th to the item for the date that I want to add it. Anything over on this side is an appointment that is past due and was not actually completed. And it gives you a little bit of an information on it as far as the start and finish dates. And I was just using it as a test to show people what you can do by looking up a past event. Now there's new events, current events, and past events. This is the screen for past events that were not completed. This is the new, and you can actually show it as completed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a thing, and I'm going to call it, and I'm bringing this up here so you can see it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a thing called service requirement. Okay, service required. What I'm going to do is, these are the different calendars that are actually available within the application, where you can change in the last screen we're in to that particular calendar. These were set up, and I'll explain that in a little bit how they were set up. This one is contact calendar appointments. In this case, there was a gentleman that was using this, and this was his particular screen where he had his data that was assigned in his calendar. Delivery calendar, dispatch calendar, so you can see who's managing the dispatching. The move equipment, where you're moving them from one site to another, appointments. Pickup, this is if you have a large equipment that has to either be trailered or driven back to your location. Rental calendar, these are things that are coming up that you're either scheduling rental, or you want to schedule large amounts of rentals. I'm going to give you an instance of a business that I worked with where I'll explain the information and how it worked. They use service calendar as well. Now, there was a company in San Francisco that had events that they did. And for example, like big things like 4th of July, Christmas, and other things where there were events, plus weddings and special events. And what they would do is they would set up the event, and then they would tag as many of these things that are related to what was going on for that particular event, so that those calendars would display the data for that particular event. So what happens is they would say, for example, it would be 4th of July for the city of LA, for example. and there would be a client come in, and maybe there's a location where they're at where they're going to have all this equipment taken to that location. Excuse me. And there's a setup that's also required within this. So there would be things that you would have to do when you do the delivery, where you would have to list all the items that were going to be used for that particular rental. So as far as the equipment assignment is here, you can see all the equipment that could be assigned to that client for all the items that you're working with. Now I have, obviously the information is in here for whatever is available for equipment assignments, but as I start through this, I can go ahead and pick say for example, I could use John Smith. And when I put John Smith in there, his company is ABC Wholesale, so I could put that in. And what it does is it's now looking at the John Smith stuff and indicating that that is the company. Now if you recall, I asked you to put in on the assignments to add the actual guy for that particular assignment or company, whatever is appropriate. And what it does now, it can tell you that this is either rented or a pending reservation or whatever within this area. So if you're creating a service or a event, you could put the event in here. You would put the dates, pop this up and put the dates in there. In this case, we're going to say it's also not going to be the 13th, it's the 13th and 14th. And if you click on this, obviously you can see how it does. It changes over. Instead of saying Monday the 14th, it says May 14th and the year. What is this event? Is it a delivery, a pickup, and so forth? This is information that is the type of thing we're doing. Let's call it a delivery, just for the heck of it. And is it routine, or is it, let's see if you hold it there, medium, or a very high priority? Clicking on this is routine, medium. You would put the event time for this date, and let's say it's 9 a.m. So 9 a.m., and we're going to put a.m. in there as well because you need to put that in as differentiating between p.m. and a.m. And then the completion time would be on the 14th, where you'd be doing the pickup after the event, and that would be 12 p.m. This is after the event, and let's call it p.m. Okay, so there's also a estimate of how much time or whatever hours it would take in order to do that. And there is a way to go ahead and do that as far as a thing. It'll bring a bar up at the top to show you the event issue, and it'll show you the amount of duration. Also, you can pick up over here and add your own events like booked, pending, and cancel. You can edit it and add other things in this area. For example, anything you want to put in this field based on what you're putting up there. So let's put in pending and something else. You could put a name of somebody or a place or whatever you wanted to in there, and it would list it. Okay, let's go down and look at the other things that are here. This is for assigned assignments. This is equipment availability. So this is your equipment listing from your inventory of equipment. And you can go down here and you look at availability, and some of these things are not editable. Like you can't edit the inventory item from here. You can't do this. You cannot add the rate or this, but you can go to the end of the screen, and for example, I can click within here and change this status, and I can change this status. If I want to do more than that, just click on the item at the end of the row here, this little thing here, and it'll take you to that record so you can modify it or change it if you need to. Like for example, this one has a late return. This was text. In this particular test, I could say, you know, schedule it or whatever, it's lighting and blah, blah, blah. And I could say customer pickup or whatever I wanted to, and then I can go to the actual record for that and modify it for this record. To-dos are an extension of items. You can put a plus over here, and these are things that are required for that particular event or the service or whatever. You would create something over in this field, and then you would click this to go ahead and add additional information and itemize it by a date or time, and then put notes in it. So that's in addition to what you're doing up here. So it adds more clarity to the event that you're going to be working in or doing something. Okay, with that in mind, this gives you some real flexibility for as far as tracking past events without having to go into the individual client and look for all the individual client records you can come to the calendar, and as you go to the calendar, I'm going to call this complete and go back. And by the way, you can also do repeat dates. If this thing is something where you're going to repeat it over a number of days, 2, 3, 4 days, then it will put those into the calendar as individual days after the set date, which is this right here. It would add those, and you can either have daily, weekly, monthly, or years. Okay, so it might be something that comes back on those particular things. To go ahead and view this as a completed item, you go in here. If you do the event and then you're actually complete, by clicking this checkbox here, it will show that as complete, and it will not go into the expired appointments. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. I'm going to call it an expired. It'll draw a line in this saying that it's completed. Basically, that's the information you want. The delivery in this case would be completed. And if I wanted to look at it, in this case, if I wanted to look at it in the month or week, I can go over and look at the week. And by clicking over here, you can create a new event on this screen. You could look at the current daily appointments to differentiate between them, who's doing what with whom. And in this case, I can do anything. For example, I can go look at the 15th and create something there. I can go back to the daily. I can see in the daily, I can come over here and see now that they're underlined as the days where there's actually activities there. And if I click on it for the 13th or the 14th, you'll see that it stays on there. Now, if I had checked the checkbox and I want to go look at this item, I'm going to go in here and say edit it, and it's going to bring it up. And say, for example, I want to do something special, like put it into the delivery calendar. I can click over here, and it's now part of the delivery calendar. So now if I go look at deliveries, as far as this is over here, I can pick that calendar for deliveries, and you're going to see now that the delivery has that calendar event where it's scheduled as a delivery. So if you want to look at all of your deliveries for any day or calendar items that are for deliveries on week, month, and year, you could look at them in that event and see them in the calendar. Now also, I can go over here and I can click on moving equipment and so forth, and if it's added to those calendars, if I go to move, you're going to see that this event is not in the move. So I'm not moving equipment from one place to another. I can also search for an event. It says input search string, and then click this, and what it'll do is it'll show all the records for that particular item. Now, obviously, I can look at the week, and I'm in the move calendar. I'm going to go back and click into the delivery calendar, and then I'm going to go over and look at it on the week, and you can see that I've got these two service dates, and I can see what I'm doing down here at the daily and also at the weekly. It'll show up in the weekly. And obviously within the month, it shows up in the month, and as before, you can always click to do a new one or click for the date to go see the calendar on that date. Okay, let's talk about some other things that are kind of unique about the calendar itself. Let's go move this down a little bit. The calendar has a thing called users, and what users are, I'm going to bring that down so you can see it. What users does is it allows you to add more calendars if you need to, or edit the ones that are in there, or go ahead and, for example, add a new one. By coming up to plus, you're adding a new one, and you can cycle back and forth between them. You can also go over here and print the list. You can jump to the next or the last, or in this case duplicate one of the records and then edit it. Now when you're adding somebody, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this and show you what it does, it brings up this. If you're going to add something, you put the user's name in this case, then you go to the login and create a login. You can choose between an administrator or a user. Most of your employees will be users. An administrator has some additional things that they can do that are not part of the user limits as far as what they can do. Typically the email in this particular case is if you're going to be doing things where you're tracking and sending out emails to yourself as far as calendar events. I find that most of my users don't really care for that much, because what it does, it pops all these, every time an event changes or a new event is added, it emails it to whoever's in the list. And that can be very nuisance to some people. Now, what you would do in this particular login role here and everything is you would add a password. Now, if you don't have a password assigned to that person, when you click close, it's going to ask you to add that particular password. So passwords are whatever you want to use. but passwords are required because if you wanted to log in as a user and the calendar for deliveries was your login, then you would have to know the username and the calendar password as far as getting in just to see that. If you're an administrator, you have access to all the calendars. Okay. Multilingual, don't use it. These are all things that are set up to set up the application and run it, and they're not something that you would use as far as changing or modifying anything. So that is that. Now let's go back, and what we're going to do is we're going to go back out of this area and go into the calendar itself and use the navigation to go back to booking. So let's go back to booking. Now we covered the usage of the, let's go down here, whoop, all this way. Now I'm seeing the whole street again. Now what I want to point out in this thing is we're going to cover, it's going to take a few minutes to do this, it's not going to be that quick. We're going to go into navigation and I'm going to look at expenses as additional screens. What expenses does, and you can look at this in whatever way you want to apply it to your company. You can take expenses that have to do with travel. For example, if there's fuel costs to go to a location and you want to put the fuel usage and maybe the type of thing, for in this case, you can add delivery, fuel used. And who did you pay it to? You could put down the gas station that you used. The expense amount would be the amount that it's used. Is it taxable as far as you in the business is taxable? And the same thing goes for the next line. In this particular case, we're looking at expenses for John Smith, which is expense ID number 1. In this case, the XID, in this case, is not actually John. What it is, it's just the expense ID, okay? Now, if I want to look at the list view or the report for expenses, I would click on these up here, or I can go to the portal to do a search by clicking on the row edge link. I can add a new month, which in the case of the month, you use the name of the month and the year, and this is calculated for you based on all the activity for that particular month. Now I can look at the list view and see the item as a brief thing to understand how it's used. I can go over here, go back to this, and now I can look at the expense report. Now in this case we have March, and these are 2 items that are in there in the summary total and the individual billing for that particular thing. Now these are expenses that you can use for overhead costs. It can even be office things or whatever you feel like that you want to track for expenses. So you have a lot of latitude to do whatever it is that's important to you that you want to use your expense report system for. I tend to see people using it where it really comes in is all the fuel costs that are required as far as individual trucks and every time you fill them up, or mileage. In this case, the mileage is quite important because you can use that in your taxes depending on the state that you're in or a country that allows you to use that information to write off your taxes for all the miles that you traveled. My son is a contractor, a builder, and what he does is he uses it to track all of his activities where he goes from site to site when he's inspecting construction. And he told me he didn't think it was that important when I first talked to him about it, but then he realized that he gets 75 cents a mile for every mile that he travels that he can write off at the end of the year. That amounted in 1 week to $750 for him that he could write off against his expenses. So it is something that's quite important to do those kinds of things. If you're going to buy new equipment for your company that is a write-off, put it in as the expense, and then obviously the things that you're buying, you can amortize those. For example, the equipment. If you buy something in this month, there are several things during the month that are going to be written off as an amortized depreciated item. You could put those in there and have the ability to track and then summarize those at the end of the year for a report. Now you can do it month by month, you can do the entire year. Let's navigate again. In this particular case, let's go back over here and do it this way. We're going to go back, and what we're going to do is we're going to run to the listing, and in the listing we did that already. I'm going to cycle, and then we're going to go back. Let's go back, and you can see I have all the same things in here that you were using before, but I want to navigate back. This time I'm going to go to employee. Now in this case, when you add an employee, and I'm going to look at the list view for a second here. Here's Alan Jones. I'm going to click in and see him. Now his individual record that was created shows that he had, on this date, he started at 7 a.m., ended at 8 p.m. His work hours were 13 hours, and he's a service department person. You're tracking his hours basically for his employee cost on a daily basis. So this is actually like a timesheet. When you add him in here as an Alan is his name, and this is his position. Now this is used when you're in the service part of the equipment products, as far as the items that you're loaning or renting out. What you want to do is you want to use him in service and his rate that he's using to be able to use that to show services costs and overhead. So that's one of the things that this is used for. Let's go back over to the listing, and you can see that you would have the ability to also to do a find in this area, and you would be able to identify all the stuff in the list view that total up, and you could, for example, look just at Alan Jones, and you could see all of the days that he worked and the summary of all of his hours as far as the hours for any period. And then you can do a date range to look at a week to see how many hours he actually put in for a summary. Okay, let's go to the next thing, which is the expense report. I believe we did that. We did the employee schedule listing. We're in that right now. And the employment portal, this is the one we also went through. So we're pretty much through all the major things that we want to look at as far as the things that are in the booking and everything in here as far as the things that we covered so far. Now I'm going to remind you that if things change in this application, or there's new things based on support that I'm doing for different people that seem to be important, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add another new video that would explain the changes or how another person has used it and had questions that may be important to your business. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. And as you'll notice right now, when you look at the actual videos that are available, there is not one there yet. This is a new application, so as time passes, I'm going to be adding a video that may address additional things that are related to either the calendar itself and how it's used. And by the way, I want to put one more thing forward on the calendar. Do not delete items in your calendar. They're extremely important for when you go back and want to find out about certain things that were done on certain days. It allows you a real good way to manage your traffic, deliveries, service, and everything else in one place to look at the activities and how often those particular activities are managed and dates. For example, if I'm looking at contact calls, that's when for example, you're supposed to do contact calls. You can even assign different days and times where you're supposed to make a call or you completed a call, and you're keeping reference information about the call within the calendar. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. Go ahead and complete all the calendar information. It's very important, but also do all of the videos that are out there to cover all the items that are important in here. If you want to obviously look at certain things, you can go through and pick off any one of those any time you want to. I did not cover all the individual lists, but they are in their usage all pretty much the same. I did cover most of them. So with that being said, if you have any questions or you need any help, obviously you can go over to the, let's go back to the calendar and move back to booking. And I'm going to drop this down so you can see it. If you have any questions or need any assistance, make sure you contact us by using the menu options and go to the developers, or you can use the help videos to recover and go back and see things that you may have forgotten. You can go back. But if you really need a lot of assistance, go ahead and get Skype and put it on your computer. It doesn't cost you a penny. If you're in a foreign country, I do Skype worldwide for support. Support is free. So if you need help, do not hesitate. If you can't find the answers in the videos, contact me on Skype, and I will go ahead and answer any questions you may have. Best thing to do is also send me an email so we can set up Skype if you have not used it yet, so that you had the actual information on how to use Skype and how to contact me. Thank you for taking all the videos, and I wish you a very successful business. Thank you.